Hello and welcome back to LTC Heroes Live by Experience Care. My name is Peter Murphy Lewis. I'm your host. I'm excited because my first guest victim at GHCA is Gerald Quick. He's the VP of Culinary Services at Bristol Healthcare. And I just met him and I said, hey, I want to talk to somebody at your organization. He volunteered. Gerald, welcome to the program.
Thank you. You said you're going to pickpocket me. That's why I was like...
That's why I slipped in victim right to the beginning, just to be honest with the listeners here. Gerald, tell me why you came to the Georgia Healthcare Association this year and at the Ritz, Amelia.
Yeah, sure. It's it's Amelia Island. It's just a beautiful property. Ultimately, our company is here to really do what we can do to help care for residents. The facilities, the administration, the folks that are day by day caring for these folks, we feel as though we can be a part of that and create some memorable experiences. We do that through food. And, if you think back a little bit, you may pick something up that's very common to you, a food item or a beverage or something like that. And all of a sudden you can have a flashback, a memory. And we believe that this is something so powerful that, it really helps the well-being of our residents. So being a part of that is something that we're really excited to do.
When you mentioned memory, it triggered a cool memory for me. When I was training to be a CNA, there was a particular resident, and I'm just going to call him Mr. Frank. Mr. Frank had pretty advanced dementia. And I felt like a decent percentage of the frontline caregivers didn't want to work with him. Either he was difficult to eat, he couldn't respond really well. And it was my goal that week to find a way to connect with him even though he couldn't speak, and it was through food.
Yeah.
And so what I started to talk to him about when I was in his room is I would ask him about the food that his mom made for him. And I'd shown him a picture of his wife, and I said, is this your wife? And he said, no. And I said, is this your mom? And he said, yes. So he was remembering his childhood, right? Because he had, Alzheimer's or something. And so I said, can you take me through what your mom made for you for food? Yeah. And I said, you're from Kansas. I said, did she make homemade mashed potatoes? He goes, And I started to connect with him, and it was around food. I'm really glad you said that. Do you have any unique stories?
Isn't that amazing?
It is, because I bet you, how long have you worked in healthcare in the culinary area?
So I've been working in healthcare now for roughly 16 years, in the long-term care side, for about a couple of years. But yeah, just think about it. Part of this I was remembering back not too many years ago. All of us have been dealing with this was COVID, and think of the elderly population who are sometimes just solitude because of what has been going on, and the one thing that can kind of brighten their day is food. So it's been awesome to be able to walk in, sit with a resident. And even during that period of time, and just taking that risk of what can I do to improve their day? What can I? And we do this, and I'm sorry, I'm a little bit thinking through so many different things. But as chefs, we're only as good as our last meal. So we really need to really create something powerful every single meal, and so creating menus. Going back and understanding the population, where the residents come from, what is something that they enjoy. We have one particular resident I'm just thinking back to. Every morning he enjoys Frosted Flakes, and so if the menu doesn't have Frosted Flakes in it, what are we supposed to do? Just provide him Cheerios or something else? No, you find a way, and. Obviously, it's easy. Just go down to the store and get Frosted Flakes. But what if they prefer something different, something a little bit more unique? Or what if it's a birthday or an anniversary? Or what can we do if somebody has their family coming in? And maybe they haven't seen their grandchildren in for years. We want to create that special memory, not only for the resident, but also for the family members that are coming in and visiting. So when years from now, they can remember that. I can go back all the way to the time where I had a point where I remember my father, we had a little garden, and I was probably 5. And we went out to the garden, we picked a tomato, we picked a cucumber, and my father took out 2 slices of white bread, a little bit of mayonnaise, and made me a cucumber tomato sandwich. And it was just my dad and myself. I remember that till today. And so I know that these are folks that also have those same memories. And we want to build upon that. And so if we can make something special on every given day, that just makes their life more enjoyable.
I love it. I love the details.
It's a lot of value. I think we add value.
Yeah. I want to ask you, generally speaking, I call it your initiation story and how you got into long-term care. And I know that you were in healthcare, for over a decade, but acute care in the culinary service can't be the same because you don't see the same patient for 7 days, 14 days, 21 days. But you do see the same resident. The resident might be with you for 5 years.
Correct.
So when you were either being onboarded or when you were doing a tour of your first facilities, when did you start to pick up on this is a different challenge? It might be difficult for you. It might have been amazing for you. Walk me through that first couple of weeks when you're starting to realize, this resident, I'm going to serve this person maybe for the next 10 years if we take care of him and his health stands up.
So my background is a little bit different. I started with restaurants, worked myself up. I was executive chef over casinos, cruise ships, hotels, multi-unit restaurants. And then at the time I was living in South Mississippi. And so directly after Katrina, there was an opportunity to be involved in a culinary program. And these were folks that, as we phrased it, society had left behind. And we cared for these individuals. We brought them in and we taught them skills. And then we enabled them to get out by teaching them life skills into the community to use what we had taught them. And they've become very successful. After that program had ended, I received a call. And again, my background was a little bit different, but I had somebody who said, "Hey, look, we're trying to do something special here, and this was a hospital system. We want to improve the dining program." And initially, up front, I was just like, it has a bad connotation. It's kind of usually referred to as industrial cooking. And I was like, I don't know. And they're like, "No, come on down. Just come on down." And so this was in Central Florida. And so they had brought me down, and I spent a few days walking the facility, meeting patients, seeing those who are caring for those patients, walked in the kitchen, toured the facility, and really looked to see what they were currently doing and where it could be. And it's like goosebumps. It's like, I can really do something special. I can make a change for these people. And so that was exciting. I mean, to feel like your skills and everything that you've learned can actually be applied to something that's going to connect with a patient or a resident. And so I took the leap, and I've never looked back. And so, it's you learn who these residents are, and you become part of their family, and they become part of your family. And as most people know, you don't turn on family. So you take the time to see, what is it that I can do? What's that little extra something? That little lanyap, a little something, a little extra. What is it that I can do to make an improvement on their life? And so walking into work, and something that I know our team members certainly appreciate, is that the time that they take to prepare a meal, the time that they take to either deliver the meal or walk out and round on that patient or that resident, and collect that feedback. And of course, everybody has thoughts on that. But to take that, and say, okay, now what I can do with this information to go back and create something even better. And then following up so that they know that they've been listened, heard. And so all that, I know it's a process, but it's just really special. So
I feel, and I'm not good in the kitchen, so this question is going to be very...
Anybody can cook. You got to watch Ratatouille. Everyone can cook.
I can cook. I can't cook well.
It just takes practice.
So that's where I'm going. So I feel right away you called it industrial cooking, right? Isn't that the word you?
Unfortunately, it had a bad connotation. I'm grateful that the industry has started to make a change and have rounded that corner, if you would, and has begun to hire folks who really are foodies, who love what they do. The industry itself, on the healthcare side, they've moved towards more liberalized diets, which is really a grateful thing to the patients as well as the residents. The other thought I'm having in my mind right now is just that, the whole dining experience. I mean, there's been enough studies out there that have shown that if residents eat communally, their intake is higher. That means is that they're going to be able to get better faster. And so it's not just from the act of enjoying or breaking bread with someone else at the table. It's actually that communication that's happening between these folks. So it's more than just the food that we digest. It's that social aspect of dining.
So my question goes to what are simple things that you can do to improve that dining experience for your residents? Because from an outsider point of view, I feel like you probably only have 5 options per day. You have a huge can of green beans that was made 4 years ago, and you have mashed potatoes that were dehydrated 10 years ago, and you're going to add water to it. Like, assuming that's a gross exaggeration.
I'm hoping so.
Yeah. How do you improve that? Assuming that your budget's not going to improve. Like, if your CEO says, "Hey, Gerald, we have to cut 10% next year. How are you going to still keep your food as great today, even though you can't spend that extra 10%?
All right. I mean, look at what's happened. I mean, CPI has increased to the point we're looking at double digits from one year to the next. Right now, it's obviously slowed down. I think last year, the last month, it was something like 4.7% if we compare this month to last year this month. So that's been a positive thing. But obviously, it's still an increase, right? Mm-hmm. Still an increase, and that's on top of the 11% that was happening previously from last year. One is to hire a professional. Hire somebody who's, and we touched on this a little bit. What is the difference between a cook and a chef? A cook is somebody who actually does a task. All chefs are cooks. Not all cooks are chefs. And a chef is somebody who's going to actually manage your kitchen. Manage the program, not just the administrative tasks of scheduling somebody, placing a food order, but actually getting involved, being highly engaged to be comfortable speaking to not only to their staff, but to facility staff, as well as the residents and resident family members. Then coming back and understanding that there is a budget. We have a budget. This is what we need to work towards. And then crafting a menu that still meets those preferences. And so there's ways to do it. Dehydrated potatoes are not always the answer. There's a way to do it. But let's look at waste. If your residents aren't enjoying the food, that means then they're probably going to an alternate menu, which an always available quote unquote menu type thing. Well, this changes production in the kitchen. So are you looking back at historical data? Are you understanding truly what your residents are enjoying? Or are you just making assumptions? This anecdotal thought that, everybody's going to enjoy Mama's meatloaf, right? But you don't have any data that suggests that's true. So what are you using? What information is being collected? What resident experience programs are you putting into place? Again, hopefully I'm answering your question.
Yeah, you are.
And then just making smart decisions. It's going through and looking when you're creating a menu, look for cross-utilization of products. Chickens tends to be a very common product on the menus. However, there's many other proteins that are available as well, and if it's cross-utilized, and if you have a nice gap where folks don't see that it's the identical product just being, for no pun, rehashed to serve to them. What is it that you're doing? Are you creating a menu? And if you don't, and if you recognize that that's a gap, well, then I would suggest as a director over a facility, have a responsibility to reach out to somebody. Obviously, I would love for you all to reach out to me, right? However, there's really some great organizations out there that can assist as well. And it's also working with your distributors, and learning, who's your rep, understanding what they can provide to you, attending some of these shows, some of these conferences. This is a great conference. And, there's, vendors here, whether it's food service or if it was something else, that you can learn and educate yourself, to make more positive decisions for your residents. And so I think that's, from the point of view of Bristol, I think that's something that we provide, which is that, we like to come in, we'd like to understand exactly what your residents need, and develop or create a menu that's going to meet their needs. Does that mean that it's not going to change? Well, of course it's going to change. We want to make sure that we're making seasonal changes. But we also want to continue to go back to our residents, see what their needs are. Are we meeting their preferences? And if not, let's make a change. On top of that, let's make it fresh. On a monthly basis, are you doing an event with your team? Is there a culinary focused event with your residents? And if not, why not? And if you have a chef and you have a staff who's a little apprehensive about doing something like that, well, maybe we need to empower them. Maybe we need to talk a little bit more, get your activities directors involved. So those are some simple tips of things to do.
What you mentioned Bristol, and you already mentioned kind of how you all approach it. What would you say are the differentiators of Bristol that make you stand out? Specifically in long-term care, like if a resident spent a year with you and then spent a year somewhere else, what are they going to miss from having left Bristol?
Our team members. Look, I can write a recipe. I can give it to 1,000 different people, and they'll come back and I'll have 1,000 different dishes. That's just the truth. Everybody had the same recipe. They all had the same ingredients. But that team member, were they engaged? So we look to try to find those team members who are that upper echelon of candidates that are available. And so we care for our team members, and we do a lot of different things for them from our benefits. Benefits are almost immediate, from, of course, medical, dental, and vision to our 401k, which starts within I think 30 days. The number of vacation and holiday times that we give off, the flexibilities that we have with our schedule, our weekly pay that we provide our team members. These are all attractions for our candidates, so that we can try to, our attempt to bring them in and to have a higher retention rate than compared to our competitors out there. In addition to that, we have a culinary program. So we have a virtual culinary program, and our team members, will take them roughly, depending if they're a high performer, maybe about 12 months, to an average team member, may take them 18 months. Peppered throughout this on a quarterly basis is that we have a regional chef that comes in and does a practical with those team members to ensure that those skills are being transferred to their hands. And so we know if we have a more highly engaged team member, and anyone listening to this, any administrator or manager knows this as well, is that if you have a more highly engaged team member, you're going to end up getting higher results. And if we are training our team members and they then understand what value that they can bring to this organization, and it transfers. You see in the commercial, where you get to see the one guy who opens a door and the next person opens a door, and all of a sudden he feels like he's got to pass it forward, saves the one child from getting run over, and it goes on and on all the way back to this person. Well, that's what it is. I mean, we have to transfer that warmth, that love back to the next person. And so we truly believe is our team members provide that. They give that gentle hug back to the residents that they work closely with.
Gerald, tell me what's something that you're extremely proud of in the last year or two. I'm asking you to take off your humble hat and brag about yourself, something that you've done inside of your organization that might not everyone, the residents might not know that your team did it. Your family might not know, but you know it made a difference in the quality of care and quality of life for your residents.
There's so many stories from our team members that come back across these caring stories, where you know of a team member who maybe they're a cook and they don't mingle, a little introverted, but all of a sudden they saw a need and they reached out, brought a plate of food over to a resident, and then followed back up. It's those little touches that happen so often. Or learning that somebody's going to have, and I know I touched on this earlier, which is that learning that that somebody's going to have, a resident's going to have a family member coming over, and remembering that was something that they enjoyed, and kind of knocking their head to remember what that was, and then making that happen. Mm-hmm. And so it's those little special points. On the facility side, I'm really proud. We have a system that their cost, because I know we talked on cost a little bit. They were able to reduce the raw food expense for that facility for PPD per patient day lower than it was pre-COVID. That's amazing.
How?
It kind of goes back to putting processes into place. Yeah. It's this, you're creating a menu, you're putting those processes into place, you're following back up, you're training your team, so there's not waste, or listen, in the kitchen, there's always a little bit of waste, but it has to be minimalized. So what are you doing to mitigate that? How are you approaching this? And so I'm really grateful for our team, because for Bristol, again, that's another differentiator is that we just pass through our invoices, so as far as a food cost goes. So we have our volume of purchasing enables us to pass on those savings directly to our clients. And so when our team members are involved in that process, the facility itself sees a reduction. Now, all of a sudden, that facility has its own mission. They can take those extra dollars that they had already planned on spending and use them for something else. What else can they now do to care for that, for those residents? And so, so those things I'm really proud of. I mean, we've had a number of team members that have been promoted. They've shown some leadership skills, and so we've been able to advance them. And so I'm very happy for that too.
I want to come back to the Georgia Healthcare Association. I go to a lot of conventions. I don't often meet someone from the culinary services area.
I'm sorry.
Obviously,
we're not shy.
Obviously, you must be great because your leadership team sent you here. But I'm interested from you. What do you try to learn here? There's usually not a lot of programs or sessions aimed at what you would specifically be interested at. So what are you picking up on? What are you listening to? Are you listening to clinical conversations? Are you listening to the way that people approach problems so that you can also understand your peers?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, you said it as concisely as I never could. Is that my role here is to learn what others are doing, even on the clinical side, how that applies to what we provide. Because, and I know that we're talking about culinary, but Bristol also provides for janitorial or environmental services. That's a big arm of what we do. So how can we participate? And so you may hear, and especially right now, you're talking about a lot of staffing crises that are going on, a heavy angst on the clinical nursing team when their environmental services or their dietary team isn't up to the expectations that the facility or the residents have. So how can we come in and alleviate some of those pressures to make it more comfortable for the clinical team so they can focus on what their skill set is? And then the the culinary team can focus on what they can provide. And so what can we learn from this? And so, listening to these conversations helps us to create a better program, again, for the residents as well as the facility.
Joe, as we start to wrap up, my last question, you might not want this to be recorded, so we don't have to share this with your boss.
Okay.
But if your boss said, hey, Gerald, you know what? Next year we have to make some cuts. We can only afford you to come in 4 days a week. What's the one thing that you do every week that's your favorite part that you do for free? And you're like, you know what? You can pay me Monday through Thursday, but on Friday I'm going to come in and do this, and I love it.
Breakfast. I'm sorry, I love breakfast. I mean, I love every meal out of the day, including snacks in between, late night meals. But breakfast, I love. I mean, you're taking something so simple, an egg, and creating something so interesting. And as a chef, as the hat that everybody refers to. And I know, again, we were laughing a little bit about this earlier, but so the hat, a traditional chef's hat, is called a tote. And in a very classical sense, there'll be 101 folds to that tote. Each fold.
Is that true?
This is true. And each, if not, it sounds great. So
I thought you were in culinary, not marketing.
Yeah. So each fold represents a different preparation of an egg. And we're not talking over easy, over medium, over hard. So we're talking a different preparation, 101 different preparations for an egg. So to take something so simple, and and I think if we kind of go back to a meal, and where it just seems to be so common that we have a meal, and of course my heart breaks for those who maybe they're in a position where they don't receive a meal on a daily basis, and you got to pause for that. But what are we able to do to take something so simple and create something so enjoyable and memorable for those who we care for? And so, for me, it's breakfast.
Great answer. Gerald, thank you so much for joining on LTC Heroes. It's a pleasure. Hopefully next year we'll be back here together at Amelia.
I would enjoy that. Thank you so much.